Zayden Pierce's arms ached, but he didn't stop. His 5-year-old daughter, Mila, burned with fever against his chest, her tiny body limp as he pushed through the sliding glass doors of the downtown urgent care clinic. "Please," he breathed out to the nurse behind the desk, his voice raw. "She's burning up. I don't have insurance, but she needs help." The nurse nodded, eyes softening as she saw the pale little girl nestled against him. "We'll take her back right away." He followed the nurse down the hallway, every step echoing with fear. He'd done everything he could: cool compresses, old antibiotics from a leftover prescription, but nothing worked. Her fever had spiked overnight, and she'd barely spoken since dawn. Zayden looked down at Mila, brushing damp strands of hair from her forehead. "You're okay, baby. Daddy's got you." He didn't see the woman standing at the far end of the hallway, her eyes following him. Paloma Drake hadn't planned to stop at this clinic today. She was supposed to be halfway to her private jet, en route to a board meeting in Berlin. But her driver had taken a wrong turn, and when she saw the small urgent care center, her family's name etched above it, something told her to go inside. She didn't know why. She just did. Now she stood frozen, watching the man who had just rushed in. He looked exhausted, his jeans torn at the knee, his T-shirt soaked with sweat, holding his daughter like she was his entire world. "Miss Drake," a nurse called softly. "Did you need something?" Paloma blinked, then shook her head. "No, I'm fine," but she wasn't, not even close. She couldn't stop thinking about that man's face, the sharp jawline covered in a 2-day stubble, the way he held his daughter like he'd fall apart without her, and those eyes dark, tired, and filled with something that made her chest tighten. Zayden sat beside Mila's bed in the small exam room, listening to the doctor talk about possible viral infections and running tests, but his attention was focused only on his daughter. She stirred weakly, her voice a whisper. "Daddy." "I'm cold." He took off his hoodie, wrapping it around her like a blanket. "I've got you, sweetheart." "Excuse me," a voice said gently from behind him. He turned, startled. The woman standing there looked like she didn't belong here, perfectly pressed cream blazer, heels too expensive for this floor, and eyes that held something he couldn't quite place. "I saw you come in," she said softly. "Is she your daughter?" Zayden nodded, standing up a little too quickly. "Yeah." "Sorry, is this your room or something?" Paloma shook her head. "No, I wanted to check in. I know the clinic director here. If she needs anything they're not offering, I can make a call." Zayden stared at her. "That's kind of you." "But we're okay." His pride flared even though his wallet was nearly empty. He didn't accept handouts, not from strangers, not anymore. Still, Paloma didn't move. Instead, she stepped closer and looked at Mila. "She's beautiful," she said gently. Zayden's jaw tightened. "Yeah. She's everything." "I'm Paloma," she said, offering a small smile. "Zayden," he replied. "And that's Mila." Paloma crouched beside the bed, brushing a hand lightly over the blankets. "Hi, Mila. You've got a brave daddy." Mila blinked at her, then gave a soft, sleepy smile. Paloma felt something in her chest shift. An hour later, Zayden emerged into the waiting area, prescriptions in hand. He didn't expect her to still be there, but she was. Paloma stood near the door, holding a brown paper bag. "I figured you probably haven't eaten," she said, offering it. "It's nothing fancy, just sandwiches and juice." Zayden took it reluctantly. "Thanks." He started to walk past her, but then stopped. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice low. "You don't even know me." Paloma hesitated. "I know what it's like to be scared. To feel like you're doing everything alone." Zayden looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Her clothes screamed money. Her presence screamed power, but her eyes didn't lie. "You don't seem like someone who's ever had to do anything alone," he said. Paloma smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You'd be surprised." He nodded once, then looked down at Mila, who was stirring in his arms. "I should go," he said. "Thanks for the food." Paloma hesitated. "Do you need a ride?" Zayden shook his head. "We'll take the bus." Paloma didn't push. She just watched him walk out the door with his daughter, her heart caught in her throat. Zayden didn't look back, but she did. 2 days later, Paloma returned to the clinic, her heels clicking against the tile floor. She hadn't stopped thinking about them. She asked the nurse at the front desk, the man who brought in the little girl Mila. "Do you know if she's okay?" The nurse looked up. "Yeah, she's doing better." He said. She perked up after the fever broke. Paloma smiled. "Good." The nurse paused. He left this behind. She handed Paloma a folded drawing. It was clearly done by a child's stick figures of a man, a little girl, and a woman with long hair, all holding hands. Paloma's breath caught. There were only 3 people in that drawing, and she was one of them. She stared at the paper, something fluttering in her chest she didn't recognize. She had spent years building her tech empire, years alone at the top. She had everything: money, yachts, cars, power, but she couldn't remember the last time someone had looked at her the way Mila did. Like she belonged. Paloma folded the paper gently and tucked it into her purse. She had no idea what she was doing, but she knew one thing: she had to see them again. The rain had started just after dusk, a slow, steady drizzle that made the city glow under street lamps. Zayden balanced Mila on his hip as he moved beneath the overhang of the corner laundromat, peering through the steamed glass at the humming machines within. The bag of their clothes hung heavy in his free hand, damp from the walk, but Mila's soft breathing against his shoulder told him she was finally sleeping peacefully. He hadn't dared hope for that 2 nights ago. Inside, the warm air smelled like detergent and burned lint. Zayden tucked Mila into the corner bench, cocooning her with his hoodie again before starting the wash. He kept one eye on her the entire time. As he waited, his thoughts wandered to that woman Paloma. There had been something about her, beyond the polished exterior, a stillness. A quiet that didn't feel rehearsed. He hadn't expected her to stick around or remember their names. He couldn't explain why it unsettled him that she had. A soft knock on the glass startled him. He turned, and the last person he expected stood on the other side of the door. Paloma, her hair damp from the rain, holding a clear umbrella and a paper bag. He opened the door slowly. "You following me now?" She gave a half laugh, stepping inside. "I asked the clinic nurse where you might be. She mentioned you talked about the laundromat down the street." Zayden blinked. Most people would have let that conversation end with a thank you. Paloma held out the bag. "Grilled cheese and tomato soup. I figured the vending machine here doesn't do much for actual hunger." He took it silently. Mila stirred, and Paloma glanced toward her. "She doing better?" "Yeah," he said. "Fever's gone, she's weak, but she's fighting." Paloma sat down on the bench across from him. "She's tough, that tracks." Zayden raised an eyebrow. "You don't know us." She looked at him then, not blinking. "I know what it looks like when someone's holding on by their fingernails and still showing up anyway." He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out the sandwich, breaking it in half. He gestured to the other half. "You eat?" "Not since this morning." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the low thrum of dryers filling the gaps. Then Paloma asked, "What do you do?" Zayden leaned back against the wall. "Whatever I can. Construction, kitchen shifts, deliveries. I used to do electrical work before." "Well, things changed," Paloma nodded. "And Mila's mom?" His jaw tensed. "Gone. She left when Mila was 3, said she wasn't built for this kind of life." A beat passed. "I'm sorry," Paloma said, and her voice didn't carry pity, just understanding. Zayden glanced at her. "What about you? Why's someone like you spending their night in a laundromat with a stranger and his kid?" Paloma folded her umbrella, setting it beside her. "Because sometimes strangers aren't strangers, they're reminders." "Of what?" "That life doesn't care how much you have in the bank. It'll still knock you flat." He studied her. "You've been knocked flat more than once." He didn't press, but something shifted between them. Not trust, not yet, but something close. Mila stirred again, her small voice breaking through. "Daddy," Zayden was by her side instantly. "Right here, Bean." Her eyes landed on Paloma. "You came back." Paloma smiled. "I did." Mila reached out a small hand. "You smell like flowers." Paloma laughed softly. "It's probably the rain, or maybe the overpriced soap in my car." Zayden watched them, something flickering behind his eyes. "She doesn't warm up to people fast," he said quietly. "Neither do I," Paloma replied. The lights flickered as the washer beeped. Zayden stood, pulling the clothes into a dryer. Paloma folded her arms, watching him. "You ever think about asking for help?" she asked. He didn't look up. "I've learned help usually comes with strings." "Not always." He met her gaze. "You offering something?" Paloma hesitated. "Then, I run a foundation. We help families housing, job placement, childcare. If you're interested, I can put your name on a list." Zayden's spine straightened. "I don't want a handout." "It's not a handout," she said evenly. "It's a bridge." He stared at her, then at the dryer spinning behind him. And what would you get out of it? Paloma's eyes didn't waver. Peace of mind. He said nothing for a long moment. Then I'll think about it, she nodded. That's all I ask. They didn't say much after that. When the clothes were dry, Zayden folded them with mechanical precision. Mila curled asleep again in his hoodie. Paloma watched him gently lift the girl into his arms. I'll walk you out, she offered. Outside, the rain had eased into mist. The streetlights cast soft halos on the pavement. Zayden paused near the curb. You said strangers can be reminders. What are you reminding me of? Paloma looked up at him, her voice barely above the hush of rain. That sometimes the right people show up when you're not looking for them. He didn't reply, just nodded once, then disappeared down the sidewalk with Mila in his arms. Paloma stood there for several minutes, the umbrella hanging at her side. She didn't know what she was doing. But for the first time in a long time, it felt like the beginning of something that mattered. Zayden adjusted the strap of his backpack as he stepped into the narrow hallway of the community center. Mila nestled against his side, her tiny fingers clutching the edge of his worn jacket. The place was buzzing, toddlers squealing in the playroom, parents chatting over paper cups of instant coffee, volunteers weaving in and out. It was loud, chaotic, and not at all where he'd pictured himself ending up. But when the referral came through, quietly arranged by a woman who hadn't exactly asked for permission, he hadn't turned it down. He couldn't afford to. A young woman with a clipboard approached. You're Mr. Pierce, right? You're here for the placement program, Zayden nodded, shifting Mila slightly. Yeah, someone called this morning. We've got a few slots open for on-site work, she said, flipping through papers. Maintenance, groundskeeping, some night shifts. It's not glamorous, but it pays hourly. That'll do, he replied. Is there childcare during those shifts? Only during the day, but we've got a volunteer this week who's been helping with overflow. She's in room B. Zayden followed the directions, weaving through the maze of doors until he found room B. He paused at the open doorway. Paloma was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by blocks and a gaggle of toddlers. She wore jeans and a black crewneck sweater, her hair swept into a loose braid. There was a boy clinging to her arm, and she was in the middle of explaining the difference between a rectangle and a square, her voice low and patient. Zayden leaned against the doorframe. Didn't peg you for the babysitting type. Paloma looked up, startled. You made it. Wasn't much of a choice, he said. The jobs don't find me. She rose to her feet, brushing her hands on her jeans. I thought you'd say no. You think a lot, he muttered, then motioned toward Mila. Can she stay here while I fill out the forms? Of course. Paloma knelt beside Mila, who broke into a wide grin. Zayden watched them for a moment before disappearing down the hall. When he returned an hour later, forms signed and job assigned, he found Mila fast asleep on a nap mat, a knitted blanket tucked around her. Paloma was sitting on a low bench by the window, sipping from a water bottle. You do this often? He asked. She didn't look at him right away. No. I usually avoid places like this. Too loud, too honest, he frowned. Honest, Paloma set the bottle down. No pretense, no layers of politeness or curated glass walls, just people. Surviving, he crossed his arms. You say that like it's a bad thing. No, she said after a moment. I say it like it scares me. Zayden sat on the edge of the bench, not too close. Why? She hesitated. Because it reminds me that I'm not as untouchable as I pretend to be. He studied her profile. You ever been broke? Paloma laughed, but it wasn't amused. No. But I've been bankrupt in other ways. Zayden let the silence settle between them. Then he asked, What are you doing here, really? Paloma looked at him. I wanted to see if you'd show up. And I'm glad you did. Zayden didn't respond right away. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a juice box, setting it beside Mila. I'm not looking for a rescue, he said. Paloma nodded. Good, I'm not offering one. He turned to her. Then what are you offering? Her voice softened. A way forward, if you want it. Zayden exhaled. I don't trust people who offer things without expecting something back. Her gaze held his. Then don't trust me yet. Just watch. The next few days blurred into routine. Zayden reported for maintenance shifts, cleaning, painting, fixing leaky faucets, while Mila spent her mornings in room B. Paloma was always there, though she never said why. She read to the kids, organized crafts, even helped serve lunch in the cafeteria. Staff whispered about her, trying to place her face. No one guessed her last name. One afternoon, after tightening a loose railing on the top floor, Zayden found her in the supply room, stuffing construction paper and glue into a tote bag. "You don't have to keep coming," he said. Paloma didn't look up. "I know." "Then why?" She brushed a curl behind her ear. "Because I like how it feels to be useful." He stepped closer, folding his arms. "You're already useful, probably got people who hang on your every word." "They hang on my money," she said quietly. "Not my words." Zayden studied her. "That why you're hiding who you are?" Paloma froze. "Who says I'm hiding?" He leaned against the doorframe. "You show up here every day, acting like one of us, but you don't live like one of us. You've got that look." "What look?" "The look of someone who's never had to count change at a checkout and still put something back." Paloma held his gaze. "You make a lot of assumptions." "So do you," he shot back. "I'm not here to play charity." "Then what are you here for?" Paloma's voice was quiet. "I don't know. Maybe I want to remember what it's like to be seen as something other than my bank account." Zayden tilted his head. "And you think I see you that way? You haven't asked me for a single thing," she said. "That's rare." He didn't respond. Instead, he stepped aside so she could pass. Paloma paused at the door. "You asked me once what I wanted. I still don't know." Zayden looked at her. "When you figure it out, let me know. I don't do puzzles." She smiled softly and disappeared down the hall. That night, after putting Mila to bed in the corner of their shared room at the shelter, Zayden sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the drawing she'd done earlier, a stick figure him, a stick figure Mila, and a third figure with long hair and a tote bag full of glue sticks. He traced the lines with his finger and exhaled. He wasn't sure what was happening, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to run from it. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime as Paloma stepped into the grand lobby of the Drake Tower, her heels clicking over the polished marble floor. She'd been avoiding this building for days, but today she didn't have a choice. A board meeting was waiting upstairs, and the last thing she wanted was to sit around a table with men twice her age who still looked her in the eye like she was a novelty. Her assistant approached, tablet in hand, rattling off updates. She didn't hear a word. Her mind was on Zayden. More specifically, on the fact that he hadn't shown up at the community center that morning. No message. No warning. Mila hadn't been dropped off with the other kids, and when she called the coordinator, they just said he hadn't checked in. That wasn't like him. She stepped into the boardroom, nodded to the waiting executives, and sat at the head of the table. But she didn't reach for the agenda. Instead, she looked at her CFO. "I'll be stepping away from the company for a while," she said clearly. "Effective immediately." The man blinked. "Excuse me, you heard me. You'll have interim oversight until I return. I trust you'll act responsibly with the reins." There were murmurs around the table, but she didn't wait to hear them. She stood, lifted her coat from the back of the chair, and walked out without another word. 15 minutes later, she pulled up in front of the shelter. It was quiet, too quiet for this time of day. She climbed the front steps and knocked. The woman who answered recognized her instantly. "He left yesterday." Paloma's chest tightened. "Left where?" The woman hesitated, didn't say. "Just packed their things and signed the exit form. Said something about not wanting to overstay." "Did they have anywhere to go?" "I don't think so, but he didn't ask for help. Took the overnight job pay, said thank you, and left." Paloma nodded slowly. "Do you know which direction he went?" The woman pointed. "Toward the old rail yards. There are some abandoned buildings there. Not safe." Paloma didn't hesitate. She was back in her car in seconds, pulling out onto the main road. An hour later, she found them. The broken warehouse was barely standing, its windows shattered, roof caved in on one side. She spotted them through the open wall. Zayden crouched beside a makeshift fire, Mila wrapped in a blanket against his chest. Paloma stepped out of the car, her boots crunching over gravel. Zayden turned sharply, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here. You left without saying anything." "I didn't think you'd notice." Mila stirred, her cheeks flushed not with fever but cold. Paloma stepped closer. "You're freezing. She's freezing." Zayden tightened his grip on his daughter. "I'm doing the best I can. No one said you weren't." "Then what are you doing here?" "I came to take you home." He let out a dry laugh. "You don't have a home for people like me." I have a house, she said, and it has walls, heat, food, space, that's all I'm offering. Zayden didn't speak. Paloma stepped forward again. You don't have to stay, but she does. He looked down at Mila. Her lips were pale, her eyes fluttered open, landing on Paloma. Are you mad at Daddy? Paloma's voice broke. No, sweet girl, I'm just worried. Zayden looked away. I didn't want her to see me fail again. Paloma's voice was quiet. She doesn't see failure, she sees you. He finally met her eyes. I don't want your money, he said. I don't want to be someone you feel sorry for. You're not, she said, stepping closer, but I care about both of you. That's not pity, that's choice. The wind howled through the gaps in the walls. Zayden looked down at Mila, then back at Paloma. Okay, he said. We'll come with you. She drove them to her home, not the penthouse downtown, but the old house tucked into the hills on the edge of the city. A place she hadn't used in years. It was quiet, with a wraparound porch and a fireplace she'd forgotten how to light. Mila fell asleep the moment she was bundled into the guest bedroom. Paloma stood in the hallway, watching as Zayden pulled the blanket up to her chin. She's safe here, she said. He turned. I see that. Downstairs, the fire crackled. She poured 2 mugs of tea and handed him one. Why'd you run? She asked. I didn't run, I just didn't know how to stay. He looked at her. The more time I spent with you, the harder it got to remember what my life was supposed to look like. And what was it supposed to look like? Hard, bare, focused on survival. She leaned forward, and now he hesitated. Now. I don't want to teach Mila that love only shows up in emergencies. I want her to see it in the quiet moments too. Paloma's throat tightened. Then let her see it. He studied her face, then asked, what about you? What do you want? She didn't pause. You, her. A life that feels real. His hand reached for hers across the table. That's not a small thing. No, she said. It's everything. Weeks passed. Winter broke. The trees outside her house bloomed with new leaves and the world softened around them. Zayden started working part-time for her foundation, not because she offered, but because he asked. She never flaunted her wealth around him, but she didn't hide it either. One morning, as they stood on the porch watching Mila chase butterflies through the grass, he turned to her. I used to think I had nothing to offer you. She leaned into him. You gave me something no one else ever could. He kissed her gently. What's that? A place to belong. That spring, they married on that same porch, just the 3 of them and a justice of the peace. Mila wore a crown of wildflowers and carried a bouquet of paper drawings. Zayden didn't wear a tux, just a clean shirt, and the look of a man who had finally found peace. Paloma didn't wear a gown. She didn't need to. Later, as the sun dipped low and Mila fell asleep curled between them on the old couch, Zayden looked at her and whispered, You saved us. Paloma smiled and shook her head. No, you just let me in. And he had, completely. Forever. The hot summer wind swept in from the hills, carrying the scent of rosemary and sun warmed earth through the open windows of the house. Zayden stood barefoot in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, carefully peeling peaches over the sink. Sticky juice dripped down his fingers, but he didn't mind. Mila sat at the breakfast bar, legs swinging as she concentrated on coloring a cardboard box into what she insisted was going to be her official butterfly hotel. Paloma stepped in from the back porch, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair, phone in hand. I just got off with the City Planning Commission, she said, setting the phone on the countertop. They approved the permit. Zayden wiped his hands on a towel. You're serious? She nodded. Construction starts next month. The East Side Resource Center's happening. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You did it. No, she said. We did. You've been sitting in those meetings for weeks. You're the one who convinced the holdout. He tilted his head. I just told them what it's like to eat dinner in the dark because you can't pay the electric bill. Turns out, that's more persuasive than a slideshow. Paloma moved toward him, her fingers tracing the edge of his wrist. You've changed more in 6 months than most people do in 6 years. He caught her hand. You changed first. You let someone in. She laughed, low and warm. You mean I gave up hiding behind a firewall and a company logo? That's the one. Mila looked up suddenly. Can we have a garden at the new center? Paloma turned to her. What would you want to grow? Everything, but mostly carrots for the rabbits. Zayden raised a brow. Are we getting rabbits? Obviously, Mila replied. Paloma leaned in, whispering, We'll make it happen. Zayden pulled her close, brushing his lips against her forehead. Do you ever miss it? What? The world you used to live in, the one with penthouses and parties. Her eyes met his. I traded noise for peace. I've never once looked back. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they drove out to the land where the new resource center would be built. It was still just a field of dry grass and scattered stones, but the blueprints had already been staked into the ground, marked with bright orange flags. Mila ran ahead, hopping between the markers like they were stepping stones. Paloma stood beside Zayden, arms crossed, wind tugging gently at her blouse. I was thinking, she said, we could name it after someone. He looked over. You, she shook her head. No, her. They both watched Mila spin in a circle, arms stretched wide. She was the reason we found each other, Paloma said, and she's the reason this place will matter. Zayden's throat tightened, then it's hers. They didn't need to say anything else. Construction began weeks later. Zayden kept on as project manager, overseeing every nail and beam, while Paloma worked on the administrative side, securing donations without ever attaching her name to them. They operated like a single machine, built on trust and shared purpose. By the time autumn arrived, the house had changed too. The spare bedroom had become Mila's official art studio, cluttered with paper scraps and glitter explosions. The garden had flourished under Zayden's care, rows of vegetables winding through raised beds. Paloma had turned the back study into a makeshift workspace, though she rarely sat behind the desk anymore. She preferred the kitchen table, where she could see both her family and the hills beyond. One evening, as they sat curled together on the porch swing, watching Mila chase fireflies with a jar, Zayden slid something small into Paloma's hand. She looked down, a key. I want you to have this, he said. She frowned. To what? To the workshop. I finished the last shelf today. It's yours too now. She turned the key over in her palm. You built it yourself, he nodded. You gave me the space, I just filled it. She leaned her head onto his shoulder. You've made this place feel like home. He held her close. That's because it is. They stayed quiet for a while, listening to the cicadas hum through the trees. Then Paloma whispered, I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd fall for someone like you. Zayden smiled against her hair. And I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd deserve someone like you. She looked up at him, eyes glinting in the low light. You do, every part of you. He kissed her gently, and the world fell quiet around them. Months passed. The resource center opened in the spring with no press, no ribbon cutting, just a gathering of families and volunteers and a plaque at the entrance that read, Mila's Place. Children ran laughing through the community garden. Meals were served without questions. Support staff offered job coaching, housing help, and childcare. And at the heart of it all, Zayden and Paloma stood side by side, not as symbols but as proof. Proof that love, when given a place to root, could grow into something unstoppable. That evening, back at the house, Mila fell asleep in her bed with a picture book clutched to her chest. Her butterfly hotel now doubled in size and decorated with painted rocks. Zayden tucked her in, then joined Paloma outside beneath the string lights they'd hung weeks earlier. She poured 2 glasses of wine, handing him one. To everything we built, she said. He clinked his glass against hers, and everything still to come. Paloma looked out over the dark hills, the stars glowing like scattered diamonds above them. I've had power, she said. I've had control. But this is the first time I've had joy. Zayden pulled her into his arms. Let's never let go of it. We won't, she said. Not ever. And they didn't.